Mr. Atkins.
Well, I'm pro-life.
Hi, I'm Carl Nett.
Mr. Atkins.
Well, I'm pro-life.
In Louisville on October 12, 2017. It was here inside that I met with a young lawyer named Michael G. Adams, sometimes known now as Michael G. is for Grimes Adams, co-defendant and co-conspirator of Allison Crimes Grimes. I met with Mr. Adams because I wanted to let him know that I was strongly considering running for Secretary of State, and I knew he was someone with the same ambition. So upon hearing that I was a potential rival, Mr. Adams panicked. He began by offering me a 6-figure bribe to not run against him. He leaned in close, grabbed me by the thigh, and said, "Carl, I'm a White House pass holder, you know."
Right now, in Kentucky, there's a primary election that's going on for the Republicans and for the Democratic Party. If you're independent or third party, well, fuck you. You don't deserve a primary. You don't have anybody to go vote for. There's also no issues. There's a couple judge races, so those are nonpartisan, so that's a couple folks. But for the Secretary of State, you only have 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans. And all you got to do is just pick one of those, just Kentucky. All you got to do when it comes to an election is you find one person that you support, that you like, that you can endorse, that you can tell your kids, hey, I voted for, Stephen Nipper or who the hell ever. So there's 4 Republican candidates for the Secretary of State's office in Kentucky. The names of them are Michael G. Adams, Andrew English, Stephen Nipper, and Carl Nett. There was a poll that was released by Signal just a couple weeks ago that said that Michael G. Adams was winning. Michael G. Adams had 11%, which was just barely over English, who had 10%. So Michael G. Adams is winning by 1% out of all the, 600 registered voters or the voters who are going to go vote that they had polled. Only 10% said they were going to vote for Michael G. Adams, or 11%. So 11%, and that's what's going to win. That's what's going to win. What's going to win this race is that nobody's paying attention to the few people that they can get out to go vote. That's, oh, wow, you got 11% of the vote? Well, then, hell, you're the chief election officer. Nah, get on in there. Nah, you got the nomination for the Republicans. Get on in there. You got 11% of the public. Most people didn't know who any of these candidates were. Stephen Nipper got 7%, Carl Nett got 5%. So they're all known by a few people, right? But the majority of Kentuckians have a profound, massive amount of ignorance when it comes to the Secretary of State race. So the Republicans, like I said, Michael G. Adams, Andrew English, Stephen Nipper, and Carl Nett, these folks, Michael G. Adams is a Republican. He's a Harvard Law School or just Harvard graduate. He graduated from Harvard, so you could say, hey, that's a Harvard-educated person right there. Michael G. Adams is a Republican. He volunteered for the Bush-Quayle campaign, the doomed campaign in '92. He is totally against early voting. You vote on one day, on a work day. Shut the fuck up, Kentucky. He's against open primaries. No, it's a Republican Party. If you vote in the Republican Party, you better be a Republican. And he's in favor of voter ID. In fact, all the Republican candidates are in favor of voter ID and of cleaning up the voter rolls. So there's going to be a suppression. There's going to be a purge. So Michael G. Adams is going to purge as many people off the voter rolls that he can possibly, purge. And he's going after the dead folks and the people that do not reside in Kentucky anymore. So, perhaps the voter rolls does need to be cleaned up, and we need voter ID. All right, fine. You can take a credit card and say, this is who I am right now in Kentucky. So a voter ID says you need a photo ID, and Michael G. Adams will even provide one for you. He will pay for it per the taxpayer dime. So he's for socialism when it comes to ID cards. Michael G. Adams, he is in favor of voter ID and clean up the voter rolls, and that's basically it. That's it. I mean, he doesn't want more voters to get out to vote. He doesn't want initiative referendum recall. He doesn't want instant runoff voting because fuck the independents. And he also doesn't want public financed election because, God, you don't want to a fair election, and Michael G. Adams does not want a fair election at all. In fact, Michael G. Adams is willing to go and bribe folks 6 figures to drop out of the race. That's according to Carl Nett.
In Louisville on October 12, 2017. It was here inside that I met with a young lawyer named Michael G. Adams, sometimes known now as Michael G. is for Grimes Adams, co-defendant and co-conspirator of Allison Crimes Grimes. I met with Mr. Adams because I wanted to let him know that I was strongly considering running for Secretary of State, and I knew he was someone with the same ambition. So upon hearing that I was a potential rival, Mr. Adams panicked. He began by offering me a 6-figure bribe to not run against him. He leaned in close, grabbed me by the thigh, and said, "Carl, I'm a White House pass holder, you know."
So Michael G. Adams, he's aiming to be the chief election officer of Kentucky. He was appointed by Bevin to be on the Kentucky State Board of Elections, and he says he knows election laws better than every goddamn motherfucker in the world. Number 1 priority, voter ID law. Get that photo ID law. That's what Michael G. Adams is all about. Andrew English, I don't know much about him. He's from Crestwood. He is also for a voter ID law. Stephen Nipper from Independence. He is the current chief of staff for Janine Hampton, who is the first black woman lieutenant governor in Kentucky's history.
Hi, I'm Janine Hampton. As a Kentuckian, I have only one vote, and I want my vote to count. There's only one person in the Secretary of State's race who can clean up the mess, and that's my friend Steve Nipper. Steve Nipper is the only one in the race with the skills, the sense of urgency, and the relevant experience to clean up the mess in that office. And I find it interesting that the other Secretary of State candidates are actually mimicking what Steve Nipper has been saying. You know, he's talked about the Ohio plan. Steve was the only one who worked on that plan. And I don't believe the other candidates even knew anything about it until he said something about it. We need a leader for the Secretary of State's office, and Steve Nipper has proven in my service that he is a leader. Steve Nipper can hit the ground running on day 1. Let's make this right. And so I urge you on May 21st to vote for my friend Steve Nipper for Secretary of State.
Which is, you know, that's great and all, but that's just a surface. I don't know what she did. And then she's not even going to be the next lieutenant governor. So what happened to Janine Hampton? Did she quit? Is she moving on to bigger, better things? But Stephen Nipper was the chief of staff for the lieutenant governor of Kentucky. Stephen Nipper has a wife, and he's got 5 adopted kids. He's also going to clean up the voter laws. So Carl Nett is from Louisville. He tried to get the nickname Trump added to his name on the ballot, but Allison Lundergan Grimes denied him of that, even though constitutionally, I think he's right that you're allowed to have a nickname put on the ballot. But he can't put Trump on the ballot, so he can't do that. Allison Lundergan Grimes denied him of that. He appealed, and it's still not on there. Carl Nett worked for the CIA. He worked for the Secret Service. And he wants to work on helping non-affiliated voters into the process. Carl Nett also wants to bring history and civics into the public schools. So Carl Nett is trying to bring more voters into the process. He wants to aim for those independent voters and third-party libertarians, the non-affiliated voters. So he wants to make that process easier. So Carl Nett is in favor of actually bringing folks on board, having more voters, not less, whereas Michael G. Adams seems to be just focusing on making sure there are less voters. But Carl Nett supports a voter ID and cleaning up the voter rolls too. So they both, both Carl Nett and Michael G. Adams support voter ID, cleaning up the voter rolls. Where they differ is that Carl Nett actually wants to bring new people into the system, get more voters into the system, whereas Michael G. Adams is like, who cares about that early voting? Who cares about instant runoff voting? Who cares about public financed election? Who cares about fairness and actually having a fair functioning democracy that actually works? Who gives a flying fuck about the republic, which is based upon democratic principles? You can't have a republic without democracy. So I'm going to get more into Michael G. Adams' the policies of Michael G. Adams, but I first want to mention this, just right off the top. Carl Nett had accused Michael G. Adams of trying to bribe him. So Carl Nett has a sit-down with Michael G. Adams at some restaurant, and he's sitting there saying, hey, you want to run for Secretary of State? So do I. And then he says that Michael G. Adams panics, and he says, hey, I'll give you, 100,000 plus. He said 6 figures, so that's 100,000 or more. I'll give you 100,000 bucks if you drop out of the race. And Michael G. Adams, he panicked. And I don't know if he accepted the bribe or not, but then he says, I got a White House pass, right? So he can get into the White House or some shit that's supposed to intimidate, right? That's supposed to scare Carl Nett. Carl Nett said, well, let me see it. No, you got a White House. You said you got a White House pass, right? So let me see this White House pass. Michael G. Adams continued his, schmarminess, and he says, well, listen here, kid, when you actually get, to be where I'm at, then maybe you can tell me a thing or two. Carl Nett is actually older than Michael G. Adams, so he's sitting there calling Carl Nett a kid. Carl Nett calls Michael G. Adams Mikey, and actually he's got a nickname, the old Mikester, so Michael G. Adams is the old Mikester. He offered a 6-figure bribe, and then he tried to intimidate with the White House pass, tried to intimidate Carl Nett by saying he had a White House pass. And then he said, that he acknowledged that Carl Nett was older than him, and Carl Nett said, well, that's good, right? He's from Harvard, so he probably should know who's, when you just look at the birthdays, right? You should be able to figure out who's older than who.
I met with Mr. Adams because I wanted to let him know that I was strongly considering running for Secretary of State, and I knew he was someone with the same ambition. So upon hearing that I was a potential rival, Mr. Adams panicked. He began by offering me a 6-figure bribe to not run against him. He leaned in close, grabbed me by the thigh, and said, Carl, I'm a White House pass holder,
But yeah, Jesus fucking Christ, Carl Nett is accusing him. Yeah, he hasn't filed criminal charges, but he said on a video on YouTube with his face, and he was being very serious. So that's a witness testimony. So we have one piece of evidence, an eyewitness testimony from Carl Nett that Michael G. Adams likes to go around trying to bribe people to drop out of the race. I wonder if he ever did that and it actually worked. I wonder if he ever tried to bribe somebody and then they did drop out of the race. Because he's got 4 competitors, and Carl Nett is actually in 4th place. Stephen Nipper is beating Carl. Andrew English is beating Carl. Andrew English is the one that's closest to Michael G. Adams. Did all of English and Nipper, did all 3 candidates get this bribe offer? And, did it work? Did anybody actually drop out that he had tried to bribe? So that's disconcerting. It makes me think about the super PACs. So maybe Michael G. Adams offered to donate, $100,000 into his super PAC. But that doesn't sound right because he would still be running against him. He didn't want Carl Nett to run against him. So super PACs are legalized bribery. All these politicians, they're going to, raise our taxes. So we pay them to raise our taxes so the police can ticket us and then, get us double taxation. And then there's sales, property tax. There's taxes all over the place. So it's like triple, quadruple taxation without representation. But Jesus Christ, I feel like that's a disqualifier. You go around bribing people, you try to give them, some hush money? Hey, here, just take this money. He wants to buy the Secretary of State's seat. So super PAC is legalized bribery, so at least do it in the confines of the law. But not only does Michael G. Adams, he seems to think of himself as some sort of gangster, and yet it failed, right? Because you ran into Carl Nett. Carl Nett could have took the money, but he had integrity. So I just, off the bat, by knowing that, Carl Nett has got more integrity in his pinky finger than Michael G. Adams has in his entire body. So why the fuck would you vote for Michael G. Adams? Since Michael G. Adams is the front runner, let's parse through his policies for a quick second. So Michael G. Adams, he's old Mikester. So old Mikester grew up in McCracken County. Old Mikester, I don't know if he was offering people bribes ever since he was a kid. So he grew up in McCracken County. He attended public schools. He volunteered for Bush Quail 92. So this actually is for all the Republicans. What the fuck is your problem? What the goddamn fuck is your problem? You're going to run as a Republican? Are you serious? God, at least there's some hope of redemption for the Democrats, but none in the Republican Party. So he went ahead and supported Bush Quayle because, you know, he admired Quayle's intelligence. He knew how to spell potato perfectly, so he supported a failed campaign with terrible candidates. The rise of Bill Clinton, so actually thanks Michael G. Adams for allowing Bill Clinton to wreck America. Michael G. Adams goes to Harvard with the help of financial aid, so he's just, you know, a good old country boy from McCracken County. He had it rough. He grew up poor. He, you know, needed financial aid to get through Harvard. He's the only Secretary of State candidate, he claims, who has election law experience. Michael G. Adams is active in shooting stuff, so old Mikester, that's one of his hobbies. You know, he's got hiking, fishing, shooting stuff, fishing for stuff, hiking for stuff. He's active in his Christian church. Old Mikester, he's a conservative election law leader with a wonderful, great sense of humor, according to his Twitter. He said his ad was very expensive. He produced a TV ad, so if he gets enough ads on Fox News, really, that the Republicans in Kentucky don't know what the fuck is going on because they're glued to Fox News, you know, just, you know, shitting on all these national leaders, but they don't get into the state government and state politics. So they barely touch the state whatsoever. But I bet you a lot of these Republicans pay for ads. So that would be a way to get Kentucky voters paying attention by paying for advertisements, and then they see, you know, at least their ads, even if they're not reporting on it. So Michael G. Adams said that his ad was very expensive, and he wants you to donate, you know, some money. He's like, oh, Lee, that was expensive.
There's a lot of cleaning up to do in the office of Secretary of State. The biggest issue, Adams says, is that there is currently no photo ID requirement when it is time to vote, and that needs to be fixed, and the standards should stay the same across the Commonwealth.
I grew up in Paducah. I was the first in my family to have the ability to graduate from college, work my way through, and then I did well enough in my studies to get into Harvard Law School, went there on low-income aid. So I've been very fortunate in my life to have great blessings and opportunities that I didn't have, my family didn't have before me. I came back from Harvard, back to Kentucky. Instead of staying out east and making money, I came back. I wanted to raise my family here. I wanted to make my career here and be involved as a citizen. So that's what I did. I worked for Senator McConnell. Then I worked for Governor Fletcher. I was his number 2 attorney in his administration, Deputy General Counsel. Then I went into the Bush administration. I was counsel to the Deputy Attorney General of the United States in the second Bush administration. I worked on 2.
The old Mikester worked for Mitch McConnell. Old Mikester worked for Ernie Fletcher. Old Mikester worked for George W. Bush's Justice Department. And then the old Mikester was named General Counsel for the Republican Governors Association. 11 years, Matt Bevin appointed MGA. So he was the general counsel for the Republican Governors Association. He's working for Mitch and Ernie and W. My God, he is the establishment. That was something else he said with the bribe. He says that the establishment has already picked Michael G. Adams.
Well, Michael went on to tell me that he was going to be the choice of the establishment. That's the phrase he used. Said that he would be able to raise as much as $1 million for a Secretary of State race for what is essentially an administrative job. He said that the party was very desirous of having someone like him in charge of the voter rolls because, as he put it, we don't need any more Rand Pauls or Thomas Masseys getting elected. Well, I was offended by this, and sensing that, Mr. Adams again pivoted. This time, again trying to impress upon me his bona fides, telling me that he was going to run for the U.S. Senate from his second term as Secretary of State.
So he's, handpicked by Mitch McConnell, and then Michael G. Adams also had some sort of plan of being Secretary of State for 2 years and then running for governor or senator or some shit. So he's only using the Secretary of State seat as a jumping off point to go to bigger, better things. Now, I want a Secretary of State that's going to be the Secretary of State, okay? I don't want you to, yeah, you can use it, but I want you to be the best goddamn Secretary of State you've ever been. So Matt Bevin appointed Michael G. Adams to the State Board of Elections, and he's worked there for 1.5 years, and then he resigned to work for the Secretary of State. There's politics between the Secretary of State and the State Board of Elections. So old Mikester recognizes that the Secretary of State is the chair for the State Board of Elections. He was on the State Board of Elections, but he actually wants the State Board of Elections to get more powerful. So let's go through his issues. What does the old Mikester believe? The old Mikester wants to reduce the waiting times by clarifying that county clerks put their early voting machines out. Okay, and he even wrote the KRS statute to this. So he's already, one step in front of everybody. He's already got legal precedent. He's already quoting KRS, the Kentucky Revised Statutes. So reduce the waiting time by clarifying that county clerks put their early voting machines out. That would reduce voting times, right? So you got to put it out. Anyway, so make voting by mail easier by allowing voters to choose to turn in mail ballots by mail or in person, okay? So that's pretty lame. But he's saying instead of just mailing it in, you could actually walk into the office and give it to them. These will help a little bit, but they're not enough. Allow changes to party registration to be available to residents until the voter registration deadline. That'll help a little bit. Voter registration deadline is 1 month prior to the election, whereas if you want to change from Democrat to Republican, you had to have done it, months ago. Probably last year, earlier in the year at least, 6 months at least. So, those things are little, but it's not instant runoff voting. It's not referendum recall. It's not public financed elections. So you're not going to get free and fair elections under Michael G. Adams. That's the point of you being Secretary of State, to run a fucking fair election. He wants to enact the photo ID law right now. He doesn't want it just to be a credit card. That's how people in Kentucky can identify themselves. Just show a credit card with your name on it. You're good to go. Old Mikester demands that it has to be a driver's license or some other photo ID. You got to bring that to the ballot box. And for those who can't afford a picture ID, the old Mikester is going to print you up one for free on the government's dime. So the old Mikester is for socialism when it comes to pinpointing an ID in every single. Make sure you get your ID card, Kentucky. You're going to be assigned a number, and really, let's just start calling you that number. We don't even want to call you by name anymore. Under old Mikester, old Mikester is going to go ahead and phase who you think you are. You're now number 257. So he says he wants to improve cybersecurity by requiring county clerks to use password-protected Wi-Fi. Common sense, it's good. What's that really help, though? Clean up voter rolls by removing the dead and the non-residents. Yeah, again, good. But that seems like obvious stuff. That seems like obvious common sense stuff. Yeah, clean up the voter rolls. Yeah, have a photo ID. But what about initiatives? Huh? Fucking Mikester ain't for initiatives. Old Mikester points out that he'd be representing Western Kentucky because there's no statewide executives from Western Kentucky. Old Mikester is going to make the State Board of Elections supreme. So he wants the State Board of Elections to be on top and the Secretary of State to be on bottom. That's just bad organizational tyranny right there. The State Board of Election is appointed, whereas the Secretary of State is elected. So only the Secretary of State is accountable to the people. So the Secretary of State needs to rule, to be the president, to be the chair of the State Board of Elections. So the State Board of Elections should be more powerful than the Secretary of State? Oh my God, that just sounds like a bunch of, what a load of horse shit. He's going to become Secretary of State, and then he's going to implement all of his policies. Yeah, you can respect the State Board of Elections, but you're the chair, you're the president, you're the one that leads the meetings, you're the facilitator-in-chief. And then the fact that he wants to raise the power of the State Board of Elections to be supreme, so he's not going to have any power, right? He's just going to step down. Old Mikester is going to get elected Secretary of State, and then he's just going to step down and let the State Board of Elections do their thing. That makes me worry that he's got some powerful comrades in the State Board of Elections. He's got powerful people in the State Board of Elections. Maybe they finance his campaign. I don't know what the hell's going on, but something's going on. He knows people in the State Board of Elections, and for some reason he wants them to have more power than he wants him to have power. He's anti-choice, so if you get raped, who gives a shit? If you have the morning after pill, that's fucking murder, so you deserve the death penalty for that. He's pro-Second Amendment, so, guns, 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 guns for you, guns for her, guns for him, guns for everybody. The Kentucky Right to Life has endorsed old Mikester, and then Congressman Andy Barr, who Jeff Young ran against. and would have been a better congressman than, have both endorsed the old Mikester. So Mikester got 2 endorsements, and overall, his electoral plan sucks. Jesus Christ, it's about as ambitious as an Adam Edelin or an Andy Brashear electoral reform plan. Meaning, not at all, okay? They're talking about doing all these things to make voting easier and better, and nah, you're still going to have a 9% turnout rate under old Mikester. So, old Mikester is not a progressive. He's not going to help Kentucky. He's using the Secretary of State's seat to go do governorship or some shit. He says the establishment backs him, which maybe that's the State Board of Elections he's talking about. Andy Barr endorsed him. He worked with Mitch, Ernie, and W. He has no new ideas. And just on a superficial, very shallow level, doesn't Mikester, old Michael G. Adams, doesn't he just look so schmarmy? He just looks so, I feel gross just looking at him. He reminds me of a character in a Christian Bale movie called American Psycho. So talk about blast from the past. He's the 1980s, right? Reagan's greed is good, Wall Street. He's got that slick.
Secretary of State in business development. One candidate is saying that the chief business officer is the Secretary of State. Well, that's blatantly false. The governor is the chief business officer. I'm a strict constructionist. I believe that you follow the laws as they're written. I practice corporate law. I know how to file incorporations and have done so with the state. I know how to...
He's got that slicked back hair, a silly haircut. It's nasty. So if you support Michael G. Adams and you want to donate to him or volunteer for his cheating campaign for this briber, then check out Michael G. Adams' website. Michael G. Adams at Kentucky, or just Google it. You'll find it if you just Google it.
Well, Mr. Adams then switched gears. He said, "Carl, I only meant that you're a bright young man with a bright future." Well, upon hearing this, I immediately interjected and said, "Well, thank you, Mikey, but I'm actually older than you are." So he inquired as to my date of birth and concluded, "Oh, you are older than me." And I said, "Yeah, I know, but at least they teach math at Harvard. That's good to know."